Hello everyone, Beate here. I hope that you are doing very well. Today's video is going to be focusing on the three main groups or categories of fabrics that we find in our daily wear. The reason why we're doing this video is again to be informed as to what fabrics we are buying when we are buying clothing, fabrics that are better for our health and fabrics that are better for the environment's health. So in other words, to have a more sustainable wardrobe. During season 1 of Fibers and Fabrics, we had a look at 12 individual fabrics. We had a bit of a deep dive into each one of those fabrics, and we had a look at the pros and cons on a general everyday basis, as well as the pros and cons on an environmental level. But today's video is going to be a bit more of a zoomed out version, a bird's eye view if you will, of these 12 fabrics, as well as a few extras that we'll be including that you'll find regularly in your clothing that you are buying. Therefore, we will be looking at these groups as a whole. I created a downloadable document that I'll also just pop in screen of the three different groups that we'll be looking at today. These fabrics are the ones most common in clothing, and you can use this when going out shopping or doing online shopping. With regards to the natural fibers, we can divide it up into two separate groups: natural fibers that is derived from plants, as well as natural fibers derived from animal hairs. Silk will be a category on its own. Let's start off with the plants. On the left hand side, we can see the environmental pros for plants is that it's good for all skin types. It is breathable and cool. It is absorbent, multifunctional, machine washable, easy to care for, and the fabrics blend very well with other fabrics. Therefore, it blends well with semi-synthetic fibers as well as synthetic fibers, or it can blend well with each other. It is a quite durable fabric that we end up with, and the softness increases over time. So the more friction there is, and the more you wear a jean or a top, or even think of something that's quite hard wearing in the beginning, such as a denim jacket. Again, a jean is a good example, or linen. It becomes softer over time. The cons for these fabrics are that the color can fade over time when the fabric is dyed. When it is more of a natural shade and it's not treated with intense colors, you obviously won't have that. The color can bleed and it gives off color, especially with newer garments. So I really advise washing those separately when buying them for at least, I'd say, 3 times. If you want to be really safe, and then you can wash it with the rest of your lighter colors or then darker colors. The fabric does wrinkle, so it needs an iron or a steam, and it can shrink. The reason why I'm saying that, if manufacturers produce clothing and they pre-wash fabrics, it tends to shrink less when you buy it. But if it's from a manufacturer that's not pre-treated the fabric, it can shrink a bit more when you wash it the very first time. But that really shouldn't be a huge issue. The environmental pros. All of these fabrics, if used by itself and not blended with any synthetic fibers or semi-synthetic fibers, it is completely 100% biodegradable, which is extremely great for our planet. The fabric dyes quite easily, it absorbs color very fast. There are a few brands that use environmentally friendly dyes that is derived from plants, and that is even better for our planet. The environmental cons is that a lot of these fabrics does not get farmed organically. So when it's farmed organically, we won't really sit with environmental cons, but because not all of these fibers and fabrics are being grown organically, we do have environmental cons that we need to consider when buying natural fibers that are derived from plants. And it is that synthetic chemicals and fertilizers are used, a lot of pesticides, genetically fired organisms, and there's of course heavy irrigation. That is something that's probably separate and is not really linked to the non-organic farming, but really just to the specific plant type. Separate plants need more water, others need less. It really depends on the plant, but for that you can have a look at the individual episodes of season 1. Let's have a look at the animal hair category. Over here, the most common ones are wool, cashmere, alpaca, and mohair. There are more animal hairs such as llama and camel, but we won't find those as often as the ones mentioned in this little block down below. Let's have a look at the general pros. These fibers are very warm and it retains heat very well. In the wool episode, I discussed this, but I'll quickly mention it. Wool is a really awesome fiber in the sense where if it gets wet, it actually heats up whatever is going on the inside, and that is exactly how sheep stay warm when it's raining outside and they get wet, of course. So you have that same properties in the fiber when you are wearing a wool coat. So if it is raining or drizzling a little, you won't get extremely cold inside, you will actually remain quite warm. It is good in moist conditions as explained already. It is absorbent, and even if the fiber absorbs water, it won't make you feel cold. It is fire resistant. Again, that's a beautiful aspect of nature coming into play. That is also how the animal stays safe from fire. The fabric lasts extremely long, and for that I would just need to say that you need to take care of the clothing very well for it to last long, and things like moth holes can appear, but again, you can watch the wool episode, I do address that over there. The fibers are hypoallergenic and it is durable, so the fiber again can last extremely long. General cons: it can be expensive. Special care is required. Again, take care of your wool or your animal hair items. Moth holes can appear. It can shrink, so be careful when washing it. In the conclusion video, I also address how you can air out all of your animal hair items, and it refreshes quite easily. Animal hairs can be itchy, and if you have very sensitive skin, I'd say be on the lookout for mohair, especially because that is the one that I find to be the most itchy out of all of them. Cashmere will be the softest out of everything. There's plenty of fake versions available that imitates wool or that looks like mohair, so really just read the label. You don't want to be fooled for spending a lot of money on something that is not actually the quality that you are paying for. The fabric can pull, and that is linked to the quality of the item. So if you would like to avoid that, always buy from a reputable brand. The environmental pros is that it is 100% biodegradable, which is great for our earth. It absorbs dye very easily, therefore it doesn't have to go through multiple dyeing processes, and the fabric lasts a really long time. The environmental cons: of course, because we are dealing with animals, animal cruelty is something to be concerned about, and I really advise you to look at brands or specific manufacturers to see what their policies are. And of course, chemicals can be used on the fabrics after they are being taken from the animals. So that is something we wouldn't want, and it doesn't always happen, therefore I put it in italics. As mentioned before, silk is really a category of its own because it doesn't fall into either one of the ones we've discussed. So let's have a look at silk. Silk can have two different textures, either a smooth silk or you can have a raw silk which almost looks bumpy. I'll have an image on screen. It's got a natural sheen to it. The fabric is extremely lightweight. It is really good for draping. It is non-irritating, and it's therefore very good for sensitive skin. It is flame resistant, again, such a beautiful quality. It's got antibacterial properties and it can last a very long time. The general cons are it is expensive and it does require special care. It is not very durable because it is quite a thin fabric and things can easily hook on it, and you don't want that to happen. And there is again plenty of fake versions available. That is something we see throughout the natural fiber category. Fakes of linen, fakes of silk, and fakes when it comes to animal hairs. So really have a look at your labels when buying clothing. The environmental pros, again, like all of the other natural fibers that we've had a look at, it is 100% biodegradable, and it also dyes very easily. Again, with the environmental cons, because we have an animal involved, the silkworms are most likely killed when the silk is being harvested. And if that is something that you also want to avoid, you can opt in for something called piece silk. I'll have a link for that down below. Overall, when it comes to natural fibers, we see that the list is extremely long when we're having a look at the general pros as well as the environmental pros. It is 100% biodegradable, and once we are finished consuming the product, so say an old t-shirt that is maybe even too old to donate, that lands on a landfill, it can biodegrade and it is not bad for our earth. Again, the few things that we do need to have a look out for is that we are buying organic versions of these plant-derived fabrics. And again, when we're going for a natural fiber that is derived from an animal, have a look at going cruelty-free. Semi-synthetic fabrics. Oh my goodness, so much interest around this topic. So let's quickly just have a look at what it is again. We have a natural source, being a plant. It goes through a man-made chemical process which turns this plant into a gooey substance called a cellulose. The cellulose then gets pushed through, it's like again gooey, so liquidy. This liquid form gets pushed through a device called a spinneret, and from the bottom of the spinneret, it almost looks like a shower head with small little holes. Through these little holes, small little filaments or yarns get formed. From these yarns, we can then have a knit or a woven fabric that turns out if we now finish it. So semi-synthetic fabrics is therefore semi-synthetic. It's got a plant, but it goes through a man-made process, which ends up being a semi-synthetic fabric. If you're new to getting to know fibers and fabrics, you might look at a semi-synthetic fabric and confuse it with a natural fiber. Usually it imitates the look and feel of a natural fiber, but it is not. So let's have a look at the general pros of a semi-synthetic fabric. A semi-synthetic fabric is lightweight, it is affordable, and therefore it was also made. It is a more affordable way of making clothing that seems like natural fibers and has some of the properties of natural fibers, but it is definitely more affordable. It drapes really well. It is also absorbent, soft, and the items maintain its shape quite well. The cons is that it can shrink, very similar to natural fibers, but again, you have to follow the washing instructions to avoid that. And it does wrinkle. I'd say it probably wrinkles a bit less than natural fibers, but again, you'll probably need to steam or iron it. Let's have a look at the environmental pros. Unfortunately, we have none. And that is again why semi-synthetic fabrics are not as good as natural fabrics, because we don't have any environmental pros such as biodegradability. Environmental cons: it does contribute to deforestation. because the trees that are needed as the raw material are being cut down. In order to avoid that, you can have a look again at your little label. Usually when it is sourced from a sustainable farming method, it will indicate that on the label. Toxic chemicals are used and it is quite polluting. I'm just going to tackle those together. Due to the fact that the raw material needs to go through a man-made process, it does include a lot of chemicals that is polluting to the environment. Again, a lot of water waste is involved, and it is quite energy intensive. So this is the semi-synthetic category, which applies to viscose, rayon, lyocell, tensile, and modal. I do quickly want to mention 3 specific types of semi-synthetic fibers or fabrics that are definitely better, and I did indicate it on the cheat sheets. It is lyocell, tensile, and lensing. The difference between these 3 and the rest is that a closed loop is used. A closed loop basically means that the same chemicals that is used in the process stays within this loop. Therefore, the chemicals get reused a couple of times before it gets discarded. It is more environmentally friendly because new chemicals are not being used every single time, and it remains within this closed loop. So when buying a semi-synthetic fabric, really go for those 3 if you can. That is really going to make a huge difference on an environmental level. And then lastly, our synthetic fabrics. This is something, again, that is so weird to people, and it is weird to me as well. I'm probably just a bit more used to it because I've read about it quite a lot. But synthetic fibers are made from fossil fuels or from crude oil. It is a type of plastic, so from the oil, small little plastic beads get made, and these plastic beads get melted down into a liquid form, and very similarly it goes through a process similar to our semi-synthetic fibers. This liquid form, plastic form, gets pushed through a device called a spinneret. Again, we have our little shower head with small little holes at the bottom, and these small little fibers, yarns, get formed. That is the base of our synthetic clothing. Think about a plastic, that is probably the easiest way to try and understand it. But let's have a look at the general pros. It is a wash and wear fabric, meaning it doesn't need a lot of attention, it doesn't need a lot of ironing. It's something that you can literally dry and put on your body and you can be out the door. The fabric is very durable, it's fast drying. Again, think about a plastic item, it can, if you put it in the sun, it's a few seconds and it's dry. The color does not fade easily, it retains its shape. It's got an extremely long lifespan when treated correctly. It is inexpensive and it is quite versatile. You can see it in loads of different forms of clothing. General cons: it doesn't breathe and therefore causes sweat. I'm going to link that to the yellow armpits. Let me quickly explain. If you remember high school chemistry, you will remember that oil mixes well with oil. So remember that I said that the synthetic fibers are made from crude oil. You also have to remember that your body has oil on top of it. Your skin, there's a small layer of oil on top of your skin. So when you sweat, it mixes in with the natural oils on your skin and it gets absorbed quite easily and mixes well. Sorry, again, oil mixes with oil. It mixes easily with the small little fibers inside of your garment that you are wearing, if it's synthetic fibers, and it absorbs it very well. Therefore, getting rid of yellow armpits on a synthetic fiber item is going to be quite difficult in comparison to getting rid of yellow armpits underneath a natural fiber garment. So that is something to keep in mind. It can be uncomfortable. Again, it's because it doesn't always breathe as much as your body needs to breathe, and therefore it can cause discomfort. Synthetic clothing is also heat sensitive and the fibers break down with heat. So really keep that in mind when washing your garments and especially drying your garments. Tumble dryers are not the best and you might not see a difference when doing it once or twice, but continuously doing it will definitely break down those fibers. And we've seen especially in the spandex episode, you will really lose that elasticity when too much heat is applied too frequently. So be careful of heat with synthetic fibers. Environmental pros. Synthetic fibers can be recycled, but not when it is blended in with other fabrics. So if you have a poly cotton t-shirt, it won't be recyclable, but when you have a 100% polyester t-shirt or 100% nylon t-shirt, it can be recycled. Also remember, recycled does not mean it is a forever substance or forever material. The same way our plastic water bottles can be recycled a couple of times until it gets to a point when it's non-recyclable. The same thing will happen with polyester, nylon, and the rest of them. So it only can be recycled a couple of times before it becomes waste. Another pro is that the clothing does last a really long time with the correct treatment. So if you wash it at the correct temperatures, you don't apply too much heat when drying it, and you don't spill anything on it such as oil, you are good to go for a really long time with an item made out of 100% synthetic fibers. Environmental cons. Because it is a type of plastic, it is not biodegradable. The entire process is very polluting from the point where we extract the fossil fuels or the crude oil from the earth. The process it needs to go through in order to make the fabric, and then once we are done with the garment and we want to get rid of it, again it's not biodegradable. Therefore the entire process is extremely polluting. We also have an issue with synthetic fibers called the microfiber or microplastic issue. Let me explain. When washing any type of garment, micro pieces of that garment breaks off and goes into the water supply. When it is a natural fiber, again, it can biodegrade and it is not an issue to have in our drinking water or rivers, the ocean, dams, and so forth. But when it is micro pieces of plastic, it just sits there and nothing happens to it. A lot of marine life end up eating micro pieces of plastic, and we actually have micro pieces of plastic inside our bodies probably from consuming animals. If you'd like more information on that, I'll have some links down below. But it is quite polluting, especially to our marine life. The entire process is extremely energy intensive to make synthetic fibers or fabrics, and a lot of toxic chemicals is required in the process of making this fabric. Let's quickly have a look at the cheat sheets and just make sense of it all. When we look at the natural section, plant derived, we have cotton, linen, hemp, and bamboo. And I really urge you to go organic as far as possible when buying these fabrics. Underneath the animals, silk, again, we can have a look at that by itself, but we have silk, wool, cashmere, alpaca, and mohair. And again, go cruelty-free as far as possible. Do research and really support those farmers doing the necessary work. We really need to have sustainable animal hairs in our clothing. When buying semi-synthetic fabrics, again, I've made a small little note there for you. We're looking at a pulp that then gets transformed into a fiber. We have rayon, viscose, lyocell, tensile, modal, lensing, capro, and acetate. And I made a small little star at the bottom saying better. So the lyocell, tensile, and lensing are our closed loop semi-synthetic fibers. Again, remember those are the ones where we have less chemicals being used, or at least chemicals being used over a longer period of time. So therefore it's better for the environment. And then on the right hand side, we have our synthetic fibers, which is nylon, polyester, spandex, lycra, which is the same as spandex, it's just the trademark of spandex, and elastine, which is again the same as spandex, just a different name, and acrylic. All of these ones are made from fossil fuels and crude oils, and you can see my little leaves going from a green to a yellow, orange, and then brown. In conclusion, when you are buying clothing, spend more money on the left-hand side. Go for natural fabrics as far as possible and less on fabrics that are synthetic. When you do need that skinny jean, a stretch, or something like that, you can have a look at something that is a blended fiber or a blended fabric. So therefore, go again for the majority, 80% being a natural source, and maybe only 5, 10, or 20% being a synthetic source. That way you can still get the benefits from synthetic fibers, but with having less of an environmental impact. As always, I really hope this video was extremely informative. I really hope that you learned something and that you can really go out and make better choices for yourself and for the environment. If you have any additional questions or any extra videos you would like me to make on a similar topic, please leave comments down below. I'd love to know, and your input is greatly appreciated. If you love sustainable clothing, sustainable fashion as much as I do, and you want to learn more about it, please hit the subscribe button and like this video to see more upcoming videos. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Cheers!